The Texas High Plains, 1878. A land of searing sun and sudden, brutal violence. For Eliza Thorne, a woman stranded by tragedy, survival was a daily war fought in silence. But that war was about to find a voice. When a raid left a Comanche baby orphaned and dying, Eliza broke the one law that kept her safe. She saved the child. She traded her neutrality for a target on her back, drawing the gaze of a venomous local rancher and the silent, terrifying vigil of a lone Comanche horseman. She thought she understood the price. She was wrong. The land itself was a predator. It stalked you with heat, thirst, and a silence so profound it echoed the hollowness in your own gut. Eliza Thorne knew this. She knew it the way she knew the grain of the axe handle, the smell of mesquite smoke, and the precise weight of the Colt revolver strapped to her hip. Her homestead was less a home and more a stubborn scar on the earth, 20 miles south of Redemption Creek, a town that had never lived up to its name. She was alone. Her father, Thomas Thorne, a man whose dreams had been bigger than his sense of caution, had been taken by cholera 2 winters past. Her brother, Matthew, had followed him, courtesy of a rustler's bullet 6 months later. They left her with 100 acres of dust, a sturdy cabin, a rifle she knew how to use, and a loneliness that was a physical ache. This day the heat was a hammer. The sky was a bleached white sheet, and the air shimmered, making the distant mesas look like floating, uncertain islands. Eliza was checking her snares, a futile effort in this drought, when she heard it. It wasn't the yip of a coyote or the shriek of a hawk. It was wolves, a sound that curdled the blood, a mix of growl and frenzied excitement. They were close. Eliza pulled the Winchester from its saddle scabbard, her movements economical and practiced. She guided her mare, Bess, through the scrub and thorny acacia, moving toward the sound. It wasn't bravery, it was necessity. The wolves, emboldened by hunger, had been drawing closer to her small herd of goats. She crested a shallow rise and reined in Bess, her heart seizing. Below her, in a dry arroyo, was a scene of devastation. A small traveling party, Comanche. The wreckage was fresh. A travois was overturned, its contents, beaded moccasins, dried jerky, a small painted drum, scattered. 2 bodies, a man and a woman, lay still. They had been scalped. This was not the work of wolves. This was the work of white men. The wolves, 3 of them, gaunt and grey, were not interested in the adults. They were gathered around a bundle of hides, tearing and snapping. And from that bundle came a sound that cut through the heat and the buzzing of flies, a thin, reedy wail. A baby. Eliza didn't think. She raised the Winchester. The first shot cracked the silence, sending a shockwave through the air. The largest wolf, a brute with a scarred muzzle, dropped, its snarl frozen. The other 2 scattered, confused. She fired again, kicking up dust near the flank of the second. They bolted, disappearing into the chaparral. She slid from the saddle, rifle still raised, and walked into the arroyo. The smell of death was thick, metallic, and sweet. She kept her eyes from the mutilated couple. She moved to the bundle. The wolves had torn at the buffalo hide, but the child was miraculously untouched, nestled in a cradleboard. It was tiny, its skin a deep copper, its face streaked with tears and dust. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Its black eyes, wide with terror, stared up at her. Eliza stood frozen. This was not a baby. Not to the people in Redemption Creek. This was a varmint, a savage. Taking it was not an act of mercy. It was an act of treason. In this part of Texas, the unwritten law was clear. You did not help the Comanche. You did not acknowledge them as human. To do so was to invite the same savagery into your own home. The baby wailed again. a desperate, air-sawing sound. Eliza looked at the dead mother, her hand outstretched, frozen in a final, protective gesture. She thought of her own mother, buried in a green cemetery in Missouri, a place that seemed like a different planet. "Damn it all," Eliza whispered. She hated this land. She hated the violence. She hated the choices it forced. She touched the baby's cheek. It was hot, its skin dry, dehydrated, dying. "You and me both," she murmured. She ripped a piece of cloth from her own petticoat, a garment she rarely wore but had put on today for the agonizing trip to town she'd been planning, and dampened it from her canteen. She pressed it to the baby's lips. The child suckled weakly, desperately. Eliza knew what she was doing. She was picking up a rattlesnake. She was lighting a fuse. She was ending the fragile peace she had maintained by being invisible. She gently lifted the cradle board. The baby was light, almost weightless. She looked at the vast, empty horizon. She was a single woman, alone, with no allies, and she had just declared war on the entire world she knew. "Well, child," she said to the baby, her voice rough, "looks like we're both orphans. Let's go home." She slung the cradle board over her shoulder, mounted Bess, and rode away from the arroyo, leaving the dead to the silence and the flies. She did not look back. The sun was a bloody smear in the west when Eliza reached her cabin. The small structure, built of cottonwood and sod, seemed to crouch against the earth. It was her fortress, and it had just become a prison. Inside, the single room was stifling. She laid the cradle board on her own rope bed. The baby was quiet now, its breathing shallow. It needed more than water. It needed milk. Eliza had a nanny goat, Daisy, who was fresh. With practiced hands, she boiled a scrap of clean linen, gathered milk in a tin cup, and fashioned a crude teat. She sat in her rocker, the one her father had built, and held the baby. It was awkward. She had never held a child so small. She touched the linen to its lips. The baby turned its head, crying weakly. "Come on," Eliza urged, her voice softer than she intended. "You fought off wolves. You can fight this. Drink." She tried again, squeezing a drop onto its tongue. The baby coughed. Then, as if by some ancient instinct, its mouth latched on. It began to drink, its tiny fists clenching and unclenching. Eliza let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She named him. She didn't mean to. The name just came. Thomas. After her father. A name of the world he would never know. A shield against the one he was in. She sat like that for an hour, rocking, feeding, and staring into the deepening shadows. The reality of her decision settled on her. She had a Comanche baby in her house. The next day, the knock came. Eliza's hand flew to her revolver. She'd placed the cradle board in the root cellar, beneath the loose floorboard where she kept her preserves. The baby was sleeping. She peered through the crack in the door. Her stomach dropped. Bartholomew. Bart. Schofield. Schofield was a man who owned half the county and acted like he owned the other half, including the people on it. He was large, his expensive suit jacket straining over a hard belly. He had a thick, reddish mustache, a face permanently flushed from sun and whiskey, and eyes like two blue stones. He was flanked by his two usual hands, a pair of listless, cruel-faced men named Jeb and Al. "Miss Thorne," Schofield boomed, sweeping his hat off his head in a mockery of politeness. "A vision, as always. Just checking on my neighbors, seeing if the heat ain't got the best of you." Eliza opened the door just wide enough to block the view. "I'm fine, Mr. Schofield." Schofield's eyes roamed over her, lingering in a way that always made her want to bathe in lie. "Fine? You look peaked, girl. It's not right, a woman like you, all alone out here. This is hard country. Needs a man's hand. His gaze drifted past her, into the cabin. Smells different in there. I'm boiling herbs, Mr. Schofield, for a poultice. A poultice? Right. He leaned against the doorframe, a proprietary gesture. You know, my offer still stands. That land payment's coming due. The bank in Redemption Creek ain't forgiving. I'll have it, Eliza said flatly. By selling what? A few goats? A few poultices? He laughed, a dry, barking sound. Your daddy, bless his foolish heart, overreached. This land ain't worth the blood he put into it. But I could make it worth something. As part of my ranch. He reached out, as if to touch a loose strand of her hair. Eliza flinched back. Don't, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Schofield's eyes narrowed. The feigned chivalry vanished, revealing the bedrock of the man beneath. You're a proud one, Thorne. Too proud. Pride gets women in trouble out here. It was then that it happened. A sound from beneath the floor. A faint, unmistakable cry. Schofield's head snapped up. His smile was slow and predatory. What? Was that? A cat, Eliza lied, her heart hammering against her ribs. Trapped one of the new kittens. Schofield stared at her, his blue eyes unblinking. He knew she was lying. She knew he knew. The air crackled. A cat, he repeated, drawing the words out. He looked at Jeb, then at Al. They shifted, their hands moving closer to their holsters. You've been neighborly, Mr. Schofield, Eliza said, forcing a tight smile. But I have chores. The goats won't milk themselves. Schofield studied her for a long, agonizing moment. He was weighing his options. Pushing his way in now would be a breach, and even he maintained a veneer of civilization. Right, he said finally, straightening up. Chores. He placed his hat back on his head, his gaze raking over the cabin one last time. You be careful, Miss Thorne. Lots of strays out here. Wolves, coyotes. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dust near her boot. Redskins. They're all the same. Varmints. You see one, you shoot it. That's the law. He turned and mounted his horse. You take care. I'll be back to check on you. Soon. Eliza Thorne stood in the doorway, her knuckles white on the doorframe, and watched them ride away. 3 dark figures shrinking against the horizon. She waited until the dust settled before she bolted the door, slid the heavy wooden bar across it, and hurried to the cellar. She lifted the floorboard. The baby, Thomas, was red-faced, his small body rigid with the force of his crying. She picked him up, holding him against her chest, her own body trembling. Hush, hush, she whispered, pacing the small room. You're all right. But she wasn't talking to the baby. She was talking to herself. And it was the biggest lie she had ever told. 2 days later, Eliza was out of options. The goat's milk was thinning, and the baby had a fever. He was listless, and his cries had become weak mews of distress. She needed medicine. She needed supplies. She needed to go to Redemption Creek. She wrapped Thomas in her thickest shawl, strapping him to her chest so he was hidden beneath her oilcloth duster. It was a scorching day, but the duster was her only concealment. She rode Bess hard, the 20 miles passing in a haze of dust and dread. Redemption Creek wasn't a town. It was an argument with the prairie. A single dusty street lined with 12 wooden buildings, all peeling paint and false fronts. A saloon, a general store, a bank, a sheriff's office, and a church. The 5 pillars of a crumbling society. She tied Bess in front of Gable's general store, her eyes scanning. The street was quiet, sleepy in the midday heat. She kept her head down and slipped inside. The bell over the door tinkled, announcing her arrival. Mrs. Gable, a woman who looked like she'd been weaned on a dill pickle, looked up from her ledger. She was the town's moral compass, and her needle always pointed toward condemnation. "Miss Thorne," she said, her voice as dry as the air, "we didn't expect to see you. It's been months. I need supplies, Mrs. Gable." Eliza moved to the counter, keeping her body angled away, her left arm protectively curled around the lump on her chest. "Flour, salt, cartridges for a .44, and do you have any canned milk?" Mrs. Gable raised a thin, grey eyebrow. "Canned milk, that's a luxury, Miss Thorne, and you ain't in a position for luxury. You're 2 months behind on your account as it is." "I have cash," Eliza said, her voice tight. She pulled a few worn coins from her father's pouch. "And I'll need some laudanum and quinine." This made Mrs. Gable pause. "Sickness at your place? Cholera?" The fear in her voice was immediate. "No, just a fever. For me. Laudanum, quinine, canned milk." Mrs. Gable's eyes narrowed into slits, her gaze dropping to Eliza's bulky duster. It was nearly 100 degrees. No one wore a duster in this heat. "What are you hiding, girl?" "It's just the sun," Eliza stammered. And the baby, as if on cue, let out a muffled, gassy cry. The silence in the store was absolute. A barrel of crackers seemed to hold its breath. Mrs. Gable's face, already pale, turned to granite. "What is that? He's—" Eliza had no more lies. She pulled back the duster. Thomas, his face flushed with fever, blinked in the sudden light. His small, copper-skinned hand waved in the air. Mrs. Gable didn't scream. She did something worse. She crossed herself, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and righteous fury. "You've brought it here," she hissed, stumbling back against a shelf of tinned peaches. "You brought a savage, an Injun, into my store? He's just a baby. He's sick. It's a plague. It's a curse," Mrs. Gable shrieked, her voice cracking. "Get it out. Get it out of my store." The door opened. Sheriff Brody, a man who preferred to let problems solve themselves, walked in, drawn by the shouting. He was a man defined by his gravy stains and his large, drooping mustache. "Mrs. Gable, what's the—" He stopped. He saw Eliza. He saw the baby. His face went grey. "Oh, Eliza, what have you done?" The store was suddenly full. The saloon had emptied. Mr. Henderson, the town's weary doctor and undertaker, pushed his way through. "It's a Comanche!" someone yelled. "She's been housing it. She's a traitor." Eliza backed against the counter, one hand on her revolver, the other on the baby. "He was dying. I found him. His parents were dead." "His parents were murderers!" Mrs. Gable shrieked. "They're the ones who burned the Miller Ranch. That thing will grow up and slit your throat in your sleep." "It's a baby!" Eliza screamed, her voice breaking. "That's what's wrong with this place," a voice drawled. Bart Schofield had entered, drawn by the commotion. He stood in the doorway, blocking the light, a smirk on his face. He had known. He had been waiting. "Miss Thorne," Schofield said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "She's got a soft heart, a bleeding heart, but she's right about one thing." He stepped forward, and the crowd parted for him. "He is sick." "He needs a doctor," Eliza pleaded, looking at Mr. Henderson. Dr. Henderson, a good man trapped in a bad town, sighed. He looked at Schofield, at Mrs. Gable, and at the angry faces of the townsfolk. Then he looked at the baby. He pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. "He's just a child," the doctor said, his voice quiet but firm. "Let me see him, Eliza." It was a small act, but it was defiance. The crowd murmured. Schofield's smirk tightened. "Henderson," Schofield warned, "you're touching filth." "I'm a doctor, Bart. My job is touching filth." He gently examined Thomas, his fingers probing the child's fontanelle. "He's dehydrated. Badly. The quinine is good. He needs boiled water and goat's milk. Keep him cool." He looked at Eliza. "You're doing the right thing, child. But God help you." He handed her a small bottle of laudanum. "Just a drop. For the fever." Eliza paid Mrs. Gable, the woman's hand snatching the coins as if they were contaminated. The entire town watched as Eliza, her head held high, her back rigid, walked out of the store. They didn't touch her. They didn't have to. The wall of their hatred was physical. They stared, they whispered, "Traitor, Injun lover, fool." She mounted Bess. As she rode out of town, she passed the sheriff's office. Sheriff Brody was inside, carefully, intently, cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife, his back to the window. Eliza Thorne rode out of Redemption Creek. She had her supplies, but she had lost the last, thin thread of protection the town had offered. She was no longer just an eccentric, isolated woman. She was an enemy. The days that followed were a new kind of siege. The silence was louder, more threatening. Eliza felt the eyes of the prairie on her. She had been cast out. Thomas, however, began to improve. Under the combined care of Dr. Henderson's quinine and Eliza's stubbornness, his fever broke. Color returned to his cheeks, and his cries became demanding and strong. He was a fighter. Eliza found a strange rhythm. She would milk the goat, boil the water, feed the baby, clean her rifle, and patrol her property line. She slept in her clothes, the revolver on the small table by her bed, the baby's cradleboard next to it. The loneliness was different now. It was no longer a dull ache. It was a sharp, paranoid vigilance. Every rustle in the scrub, every shadow at dusk, was a threat. She expected Schofield and his men. She expected the townsfolk. She did not expect the horseman. She saw him 3 days after her trip to town. He was on the ridge to the west, the one that caught the last light of the sun. He was a silhouette, unmoving, horse and rider as one. He was too far to make out details, but he was not Schofield. This man was lean, sitting his pony with a casual, perfect balance. He wore no hat. He was Comanche. Eliza's blood ran cold. She snatched Thomas and ran into the cabin, barring the door. She watched through the window slit, her rifle barrel resting on the sill. He did not move. He just sat, watching. He was still there when the sun bled out, and he was still there when the moon, a pale sliver, rose. Then, as silently as he appeared, he was gone. Eliza didn't sleep. She sat in the rocker, the rifle across her lap, and listened. He was back the next day. Same spot, same time. A silent, terrifying vigil. She tried to understand. Was he a scout? Was a war party coming? Was he related to the baby? Had he come to take revenge? But he didn't attack. He didn't signal. He just watched. On the third morning, she woke from a fitful doze to find something on her porch. She approached it cautiously, revolver drawn. It was a rabbit, skinned, cleaned, and laid neatly on the flat stone by her door. Eliza stared. This was not the act of a man preparing for a massacre. This was a gift, a provision. She looked to the ridge. He was there. He raised a hand, palm open, a sign of peace. Eliza didn't return it. She snatched the rabbit and slammed the door. This was more terrifying than an attack. Schofield, she understood. The town, she understood. Theirs was a blunt, artless hatred. This was complex. This was an intelligence she couldn't read. That night, the horseman changed his pattern. He didn't just stay on the ridge. He rode closer. He circled the cabin, always just outside the range of her rifle, a phantom in the moonlight. Eliza was frantic. She couldn't protect the baby and watch every wall at once. "What do you want?" she screamed into the night, her voice raw. The rider stopped, his horse a shadow among shadows. He was close enough now to see. He was young, dressed in buckskin leggings and a simple breechcloth. His hair was long and unbound. He had a strong, angular face. He carried a bow, not a rifle. He said nothing. He just watched her, his expression unreadable in the gloom. Then he turned his horse and vanished. The next morning, there was another gift. Not a rabbit. This time it was a small bundle of dried herbs tied with sinew. She recognized them. Willow bark, for fever, the kind she couldn't find. He knew the baby was sick. He knew she was alone. The silent watcher, the man on the ridge, was not a threat. He was a guardian. The realization did not comfort her. It terrified her more. She was a woman alone, with a white man's baby, being protected by a Comanche warrior. The world had turned upside down. She was trapped between two peoples, and belonged to neither. And she knew, with a certainty that settled in her bones, that this fragile, impossible peace was about to be broken. The full moon was a cold, silver dollar tacked to the black velvet sky. It bleached the landscape, casting hard, black shadows. It was a night for ghosts, a night for reckonings. Eliza sat on her porch, the Winchester across her knees. Thomas was asleep inside, his breathing deep and regular. For the first time in a week, she felt a moment of peace. It shattered when the Horseman appeared. He didn't emerge from the horizon. He simply materialized at the edge of her small yard, just beyond the goat pen. He was on foot. His horse was nowhere to be seen. Eliza was on her feet in an instant, the rifle at her shoulder, the sights aligned on his chest. "That's far enough," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The man stopped. He was tall, taller than she'd thought, and moved with a grace that was almost liquid. He raised his hands slowly, palms out. They were empty. "I have nothing for you," Eliza said, her heart pounding. "The rabbit, the herbs. I thank you. But you need to leave. You can't be here." He said nothing. He simply stood, a statue in the moonlight. He was beautiful, in the way a storm or a panther is beautiful, all lean muscle and contained power. "Do you understand me?" she demanded. He tilted his head, as if listening to a sound she couldn't hear. Then, slowly, he began to move. Not toward her, but to the side, towards the cabin window. "No!" she yelled, moving to intercept him. "Stay back!" He stopped again. He was perhaps 20 yards away. He looked at her, then at the cabin. He pointed at the door. "He's asleep," Eliza said, her throat dry. "The baby. He's fine." The man's face, which had been impassive, broke. A flicker of something. Pain? Recognition? He took a step closer. "I said stay back." He ignored her. He was walking toward the cabin door. Eliza was shaking. She could shoot him. She should shoot him. A trespasser, a savage, in the middle of the night. No one in Redemption Creek would call it murder. But her finger wouldn't pull the trigger. He hadn't threatened her. He had fed her. He reached the door. He didn't try the handle. He just stood before it, as if paying his respects. He turned to face her. The moonlight caught the high planes of his cheekbones and the dark, deep-set eyes. They were not filled with malice. They were filled with a bottomless, aching sorrow. He raised his right hand. He pointed to his own chest. "Matai!" he signed, bringing his fist to his heart. "Brother." Eliza didn't understand the sign. He tried again, more urgently. He pointed to the cabin where Thomas slept. Then he made a rocking motion with his arms. "Baby." "Yes," Eliza whispered. "The baby." He pointed to his chest again. Then he pointed to the dead woman in the arroyo. He pointed south, toward the place of the massacre. He made a sign for a woman. Sister. The breath left Eliza's body. His mother was your sister. The man nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin. He was the baby's uncle. He took a step toward Eliza. His face was a mask of grief and desperation. He held out his hand. Eliza's blood turned to ice. She knew what this was. He had come for the baby. "No," she said, raising the rifle again. "No, you can't. He's safe here." The man's face darkened. He shook his head, frustrated. He stepped forward again, his hand still outstretched. He was not asking. "No!" Eliza shouted, stumbling back. "I saved him. I fed him. He's mine." The man growled, a low sound from his chest. He signed again, his movements sharp, angry. "Baby. Mine. Give." "Get away!" she screamed, blinded by panic. She was not giving up this child. Not to the wilderness, not to this man. Not to anyone. This child was all she had left to fight for. "He's asking for her hand." The new voice, thick with whiskey and malice, cut through the night. Eliza spun around. Bart Schofield was at the edge of the property, on his horse. Behind him were Jeb, Al, and 4 other men from the town, all armed, all drunk. They had been watching. They had seen the whole exchange. "Well now, Miss Thorne," Schofield sneered, his teeth white in the moonlight. "This is a cozy little picture. I heard the rumors, but I didn't believe 'em. Entertaining callers at Moonrise." The Comanche warrior had not moved. He had simply melted into the shadow of the cabin, his hand on the hilt of a long knife. "Look at that, boys," Schofield laughed, pointing at the warrior's outstretched hand, still frozen in the gesture of his demand. "He's proposing. The savage is asking for her hand in marriage." A wave of drunken laughter rolled across the yard. "It's not what you think," Eliza cried, her mind reeling. "Oh, I think it is," Schofield said, his good humor evaporating, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. "We find you in the dead of night, parleying with a red-skinned buck. After you steal his spawn, you've gone native, girl. You're a traitor to your own kind." "He came for the baby," Eliza said, her voice shaking. "He came for you," Schofield spat, "and we're here to put a stop to it." He raised his own rifle. "This is a righteous cleansing, Miss Thorne. We're here to save your soul and claim your land." He leveled the rifle, not at the warrior, but at Eliza. "Kill the Injun," he ordered his men, "and the woman." The night exploded. Gunfire tore the night apart. The first shot wasn't from Schofield. It was from Eliza. She didn't aim at Schofield. She aimed at the lantern hanging from his saddle. The bullet struck metal, and the lantern exploded, plunging the yard into a confusing mix of moonlight and deep shadow. "Get inside!" a voice yelled. Eliza recoiled, stunned. The voice had come from the shadow by her door. The Comanche warrior. He had spoken. He grabbed her arm, his grip like steel, and threw her through the cabin door. "The bar! Bar the door!" His English was perfect, clipped, educated. Eliza slammed the heavy wooden bar into place just as a volley of bullets hammered the door. Splinters flew into the room. "Who? What?" Eliza stammered, reloading her Winchester by feel. "No time," the man said. He was at the window slit, his bow in his hand. An arrow thudded into the wood outside, followed by a choked, gurgling scream. One of Schofield's men. "You speak English," Eliza said, stating the obvious, her mind unable to cope. "And you shoot well," he replied, his voice tight. "Stay away from the door." Thomas was screaming, his cries sharp with terror. "My name is Silas," the warrior said, knocking another arrow. "The boy's mother was my sister. His name is not Thomas. It is Tavibo. He who brings the sun." "Silas?" Eliza whispered. That's a white name." "My father was a white man," Silas said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "My mother was Comanche. I was sent to a mission school. I learned your language. I learned your God. And I learned your cruelty." He loosed another arrow, a cry of pain. "They taught me that to be silent is to be safe. They were wrong." Outside, Schofield was raging. "She's in there with him. They're in there together. Burn them out. Burn the whole damn place." "They're going to set the fire," Eliza said, panic rising in her throat. "Yes," Silas said calmly. He was checking the root cellar door in the floor. "We will not be here when they do." He looked at her, his eyes unreadable in the dark. "You misunderstood me." "What?" "At the door. I was not asking for your hand in marriage. That was the white man's poison." "You were asking for the baby," Eliza said, holding the terrified child. "No." Silas's gaze was intense. "I was not asking for the baby. I was asking for your hand, your help." "My help?" I held out my hand. "In my tongue, it is the sign of an alliance, a bond. I was offering you my protection. I was asking for your hand, in this fight. You, me, and the boy. A new tribe." Eliza stared at him. The proposal that Schofield had mocked, the demand she had feared. It was an offer of partnership, a warrior asking a homesteader to stand with him. "You saved my blood," Silas said, his voice dropping. "My sister's son. My people are gone, or scattered. Schofield's men raided my sister's camp while I was hunting. They are the ones who killed her. They thought they killed everyone." The pieces clicked into place. Schofield hadn't just happened upon the scene. He caused it. He was wiping out the last of the local Comanche to secure the land, and Eliza had picked up the only living evidence. Smoke. Thick and acrid. It was pouring through the cracks in the walls. "They've lit the goat shed," Silas said, his voice tight. "It will catch the cabin roof. We're trapped." "No." Silas heaved open the heavy root cellar door. A rush of cool, earthy air came up. "My people always have a way out. This cellar, does it lead outside?" "Yes," Eliza said, her mind racing. "A small tunnel, for drainage. It comes out in the arroyo, 20 yards from the house." "Good." Silas looked at her. "He is Tavi, not Thomas." "Tavi," Eliza repeated. "Give me the boy." Eliza hesitated. This was the moment of truth. "Trust," Silas said. "It is the only thing we have." Eliza looked at the smoke, at the screaming baby, and at the man whose name was Silas. He was an outcast from 2 worlds, just as she was. She handed him the baby. "Go first," he commanded. "I will be behind you. Carry the rifle. I will carry the bow. And the future." Eliza Thorne nodded. She lowered herself into the darkness of the root cellar, the smell of smoke and burning pine in her nostrils. She had rescued a dying baby. And now, the man the world saw as a silent, savage horseman was asking her to help him save them all. The drainage tunnel was a coffin of damp earth. It was barely wide enough to crawl through, and the darkness was total. Eliza led, the Winchester pushed out in front of her. Behind her, she could hear Silas, and the muffled, frightened whimpers of Tavi. The air was thick with the smell of roots and her own fear. Above them, they heard the roar of the fire as the cabin roof caught. They heard the triumphant whoops of Schofield's men. "They think we're burning," Eliza whispered, her voice bouncing off the packed dirt. "Let them," Silas's voice came from the blackness. "A man is never so careless as when he believes he has won." The tunnel ended in a tangle of mesquite roots at the edge of the arroyo. Eliza pushed aside the brush. The night air was cool. She scrambled out, caked in mud, and immediately raised her rifle. Silas emerged a moment later. Tavi tucked securely against his chest. The baby was quiet, his eyes wide, staring at the man who held him. From their position, they could see the homestead. It was an inferno. The cabin, the goat shed, the small corral. Everything she had owned, everything her father had built, was a tower of orange flame, painting the undersides of the clouds a sickening red. Schofield and his men were silhouettes against the blaze. They were passing a bottle, laughing. "The bitch is fried," Jeb slurred, his voice carrying on the night air. "And the redskin whelp with her," Schofield added. He took a long pull from the bottle. "A good night's work, boys. Cleared the land of the trash. Now, it's all mine." Rage, cold and pure, flooded Eliza's body, washing away her fear. He had taken her home. He had killed Tavi's mother. He had tried to murder them all. She raised the Winchester. She had a clear shot at Schofield. A hand on her arm stopped her. Silas. He shook his head. "Not like this," he whispered. "This is not your way. This is his." "He has to pay," Eliza hissed. "He will." Silas looked at the arroyo, then back at her. "My horse is hidden, north of here. Take the boy. Ride. Ride until the sun comes up." "And you?" "This is my reckoning," Silas said. "He killed my sister. Blood must answer by blood." "No." Eliza's voice was sharp. "You said it yourself. A new tribe. We stand together." She looked at the burning ruins of her home. "He didn't just kill your sister. He took my life. We do this together." Silas studied her face in the firelight. He saw the same steel he had seen on the porch. He nodded. "Together." He handed Tavi back to her. "Stay here. Stay in the shadows. Use the rifle only when you must." "What are you—" But he was gone. He didn't run. He melted. He flowed from one shadow to the next, a phantom moving up the arroyo toward the drunken men. Eliza watched, her heart in her throat. Schofield and his men were mounting up, ready to ride back to town and proclaim their victory. A man screamed. It was Al. He clutched at his throat, an arrow protruding from it, and toppled from his saddle. "Ambush!" Schofield roared, fumbling for his own rifle. "It's the buck! He got out!" The men panicked, firing wildly into the darkness. Jeb, the other man who had been with Schofield, spurred his horse. "I ain't dying for this!" he yelled, galloping away into the night. Another arrow, another man down. "He's in the arroyo!" Schofield yelled. He and his two remaining men dismounted, using their horses for cover, and began firing into the dry riverbed. This was Eliza's moment. She was behind them. She raised the Winchester. She took a breath. She let it out. The first shot took a man in the back. He collapsed without a sound. The second man spun, his eyes wide with shock. "Where?" Eliza's second shot took him in the chest. Now it was just Schofield. He stood alone, his horse gone, his back to the inferno of the cabin. He saw Eliza step out of the shadows, the rifle in her hands, Tavi strapped to her back. "You," he breathed, his face a mask of disbelief and hatred. "The traitor bitch!" He raised his revolver. An arrow sprouted from his shoulder, spinning him around. He cried out in pain, dropping the gun. Silas emerged from the other side of the yard, his bow still raised. He was a figure of vengeance, his face streaked with ash. Schofield was trapped between them, the warrior and the homesteader. You'll hang for this," Schofield gasped, clutching his shoulder. "Both of you, killing a white man." "You're not a man," Eliza said, her voice dead. "You're just a greedy, murdering coward. You killed his sister. You burned my home. You tried to kill a baby. He was a savage!" Schofield screamed. "Who?" Silas asked, his voice quiet, as he knocked another arrow. "Him? Or you?" Schofield made a desperate lunge for his fallen pistol. Eliza fired. Silas fired. The rifle shot and the thwang of the bowstring sounded as one. Bartholomew Schofield fell, his body silhouetted against the flames of the life he had destroyed. And then he was still. The silence that descended was heavier than the smoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the soft cry of Tavi. Eliza and Silas stood, 50 yards apart, the dead man between them. They were two outcasts, covered in soot and blood, their old lives in ashes. Silas walked to her. He looked at the smoking ruin of her cabin. "He took everything," Eliza said, her voice breaking. Silas looked at Tavi, who was reaching for her. "No," he said, "not everything." He looked at the ridge, where the first pale hint of grey was touching the eastern sky. "My father," Silas said, "left me a name. My mother left me a people. Schofield left me nothing but revenge. But you have given me a future." Eliza looked at the baby, Tavi. She looked at this man, Silas. She had nothing. No home, no reputation, no place in the world. "Where will we go?" she whispered. Silas pointed, not north to the Comanche lands, and not east to the white towns. He pointed west, toward the mountains, toward the unknown. "We will not go," Silas said, "where we are known. We will go where we can be." Eliza Thorne nodded. She checked her rifle, adjusted the baby on her back, and turned away from the fire. She, the silent horseman, and the baby he called son, walked away from the ashes and into the dawn. The fire was a hungry god, and it was thorough. As the first hint of pearlescent grey light touched the eastern sky, the inferno that had been Eliza's life collapsed in on itself. The roof caved in with a final, defeated whoosh, sending a billion sparks spiraling up into the fading night. What remained was a smoking, glowing skeleton of timbers, a black stain on the prairie. Silence descended, thick and absolute, broken only by the soft, whimpering cries of Tavi. Eliza stood frozen, the rifle feeling impossibly heavy in her hands. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving a cold, hollow emptiness. It was gone. Her father's rocker, the rope bed, the small, warped mirror she had used to braid her hair, the tin cup her brother had given her. All of it was ash, indistinguishable from the bodies of the men who had destroyed it. She felt a sob, dry and hard, catch in her throat. She had wept for her father and for Matthew. There were no tears left for this. "Eliza." Silas's voice cut through her paralysis. He was not looking at the fire. He was looking at the bodies of Schofield and his men, his face grim in the new light. "They will come," he said, his voice low. "The one who fled. Jeb. He will go to the town. He will tell them. They will send the sheriff. They will send a posse." His logic was a bucket of cold water. "They will not find us murderers," Silas continued. "They will find us. Pray. We must be gone." "Gone where?" Eliza asked, her voice a raw whisper. "We have nothing. No food, no water." "We have this," Silas said. He gestured not to the west, but to the dead men. Eliza flinched. She understood. "No, I can't." Silas walked over to her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a physical weight. "They tried to burn us. They tried to murder Tavi. They killed my sister. Their laws, their rules, they are not for us. We are not them." He looked at her, his dark eyes demanding. "Are we?" He was right. The world that she had known, the world of Mrs. Gable, of Sheriff Brodie, of rules and accounts, had cast her out. It was a lie. This, the smoke and blood and the need to survive, was the truth. "No," she said, her voice firming. "We are not them. Then we take what we need to live." The next hour was a grim, silent ritual. Silas was methodical, searching the bodies with a dispassionate efficiency. Eliza, her stomach churning, forced herself to help. Her hands, shaking at first, grew steady. They were no longer men. They were resources. They found 2 more rifles, a Henry repeater and another Winchester, and 3 pistols. They found ammunition belts, and Eliza filled her father's old leather pouch with cartridges until it bulged. They found 2 canteens, both half full. They found a canvas satchel, on one of the men containing a brick of hardtack, a twist of salt, and a small sealed tin of coffee. It was a treasure. On Schofield's body, Silas found a thick leather wallet. He opened it, looked at the sheaf of paper money inside, and then, without a word, handed it to Eliza. She stared at the money. It was stained. "It's blood money." "It is paper," Silas replied. "It will buy milk in a town far from here. Take it." Eliza stuffed the wallet deep into her duster pocket. It felt like a stone. Silas moved to the horses. 2 had been killed in the crossfire. 3 remained, including Schofield's large bay mare and the horse Jeb had abandoned. They were nervous, rolling their eyes at the smell of smoke and death. Silas spoke to them, low and soft, in the Comanche tongue. The sound was a strange, musical murmur in the desolate landscape. The horses calmed, their ears pricking. "Nocona," he said, patting the neck of his own Appaloosa, which he had retrieved from its hiding place. "He is my horse. These 2. They are our passage." He quickly fashioned a bridle for the stray and rigged Schofield saddle onto the bay. He loaded the supplies, tying the canteens and the extra rifles. The work was fluid, practiced. He was a man who had spent his life preparing, moving, and surviving. Eliza watched, realizing how little she knew about the world and how much she had to learn from him. She tended to Tavi, cleaning his face with a damp cloth she'd salvaged and restrapping him to her chest. He was quiet now, exhausted, his small dark eyes fixed on her. He nuzzled against her, seeking comfort. A fierce, protective wave, stronger than her grief, washed over Eliza. This was her home now. This small, breathing child. Silas brought her the bay mare. It was a fine animal, much better than her old Bess. The irony was bitter. "You will ride her," Silas said. "She is strong." Eliza mounted, settling into the expensive leather saddle. Silas swung onto Nocona's bare back, as if he were born there. He looked at the smoking ruin, then at her. "We do not look back," he said. "They'll follow," Eliza said. "They'll hunt us. Let them." Silas's gaze was fixed on the west, on the high blue shadows of the distant mountains. "They are looking for a white woman and a Comanche buck. They will not find us. We are something else." He kicked his pony, and the horse moved into a steady trot. Eliza took a last look at the black scar on the land that had been her home. She saw the graves of her father and brother, simple wooden crosses near the burned-out cabin. She couldn't even give them a proper goodbye. "He who brings the sun," she whispered to the baby, Tavi. The sun was indeed rising, a sliver of blinding gold that set the prairie grass ablaze with light. It was a new day, a terrible, frightening, and new day. She turned the bay mare's head, the horse's strong muscles moving beneath her. She fell into place beside Silas, Tavi secure between her and the saddle horn. They rode west, 2 silent figures against the vast, unforgiving light, leaving nothing behind them but ashes and the dead. That single night changed everything. Eliza and Silas, bound by the child they both protected, vanished into the territories. They were not lovers, not in the simple way stories are told. They were something more rare. They were a tribe. They faced hardship, prejudice, and the brutal, unforgiving nature of the West. But they faced it together. The story of the Comanche lover and the savage who proposed to her became a dark legend in Redemption Creek, a cautionary tale told by men who never knew the truth. But what is the real legacy of that night? It's a reminder that courage isn't about the fight you expect. It's about the one you choose. It's about finding humanity in a place that has none, and discovering that a family isn't always the one you're born into, but the one you're willing to burn the world down to protect. If this story of grit and impossible choices resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who appreciates a story with real heart. And don't forget to subscribe for more true tales of the Wild West you've never heard. Click the bell so you never miss a new story.